Hi there, welcome along to another video here on my channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk and we're going to be doing a box opening and review. Today is the turn of Oxford Rail and one of their new Livery releases. So without further ado, let's take a closer look, shall we? It's nice to see the reliveries from Oxford Rail and they're getting these out there and we're getting some very interesting and different private owner liveries. And what we've got here is one of the Coke wagons, and so we've got the greedy boards at the top. I've heard them referred to on top of what would otherwise be a standard wagon, and this is generally because the coke was a much lighter substance than coal, so it occupied a larger volume for the same weight compared to, say, coal. But this particular wagon caught my eye, and I actually thought that Renishaw Iron Company might have been near Wigan. But I've looked them up, and they're actually in Derbyshire, somewhere near Tinsley, I think. And they were a concern that ran from the 19th century and eventually got swallowed up in the nationalisation of Britain's industry in the 1940s and 50s. And then was shut down wholesale in 1968 as uneconomical to continue running, with the loss of somewhere over half of the jobs at the site. But this particular wagon is presumably from the golden age of that company in the 1920s or 30s. We've got on the end of the box there the code OR76CK7004. It's quite a bit of a handful there. But it says below 7-plank mineral wagon Coke, Renishaw Iron Company 917 with 2 coke rails, which is what I referred to as the greedy bars. We're going to get into this. This is a pretty standard form factor box, the same as both Bachmann and Hornby are now using. But the Oxford Rail card always seems to be a little bit more prone to fading in the sun and just to be a little bit lighter, but it doesn't really matter too much once you get inside. Now, the wagon itself is very nicely finished, and I've been very, very pleased with these Oxford Rail releases. I think, you know, they're bringing these to the market for around half of what the comparable Bachmann or Hornby wagons are, although the newly retooled Hornby wagons that we've been reviewing recently, it has to be said that they've become a lot more keen on the price. But the Oxford Rail ones, certainly they've kind of helped to depress the prices a little bit, which has helped the funds of the average modeller and make those funds go a little bit further, which can only be welcomed. The livery application itself is reasonably crisp, but one thing that I have noticed is you see the white there. It doesn't seem to be a very, very thick application of the white, so there's a lot of bleed through of the colours underneath. If they were entirely over the brown, that wouldn't really be quite so noticeable, but you can see where it goes across the black strapping, there is a change in colour, and that is the black from the tempo printing bleeding through a little bit. You tend to see this a lot worse with the wagons with a red base livery, and I don't know what it is about those, but certainly Oxford Rail have struggled with the red base livery wagons, but this brown one does seem to have, to a much lesser degree, that same issue. That said, the rest of the wagon is finished nicely. We've got very crisp application of the black on the metalwork, and we've also got the now pretty standard works plates on the what would be a wooden sole bar, and they really are nicely reproduced, and I've got every faith that under close magnification we're going to be able to see the wagon builder's details, and I'm hoping that we might see a date on those plates, which will give us a clue as to what period this wagon would be suitable for running in. But I'm going to guess at 1930s, maybe late 1920s, but we'll see what that does show up. The running gear underneath is an area where Oxford Rail have really stood out, and there's an awful lot of detail which, in all honesty, you're never really going to see, but it's there anyway. The brake gear all lines up with the wheels, and the metal wheels that they're fitting are actually pretty nice. We've got here split spoke wheels and fully metal on a very slender axle. They're pretty free running if I give those a spin there. And then we've got the couplings mounted in NEM pockets, with the mount to the chassis being fairly unobtrusively mounted between the faces of the wheels. So if you're wanting to remove these, you don't have to carve away bits from the chassis of the wagon to hide those, because they are pretty well hidden anyway. And because they're industry standard NEM pockets, we can take these off and replace with any standard couplings that you really want. The wheels as well themselves, we've got the white faces, the white wall tyres, as I tend to have the bad habit of calling them, are all nice and crisply reproduced. And the W irons as well, nicely reproduced as part of the plastic moulding. The brake gear is very slender, and no, that is plastic. It's a little bit flexible plastic. But somebody did ask me whether these were posable, and I'm trying to see. It's difficult to tell. Oh, now there. If you look, the brake gear is posable. So you could actually pose it with the handbrake on. Or, as you know, if it was in a tray, pose it back up there. And that's actually quite an interesting and nice touch. So it's just a little bit something extra that these Oxford Rail wagons appear to be offering. And it's something, actually, I've not put that to the test with any of the previous Oxford Rail wagon reviews. But my guess is they probably all allow an element of posing of that brake gear. So it's just, yeah. You can move that up and down and put it in any position you like. Of course, in freight trains, because these were notionally unbraked, they had no train brake, just the handbrake. When you came to a hill and the train was running down the hill, they would tend to stop at the top of the hill and pin down some of the wagon brakes. And by pinning them down, what they actually mean is apply the brakes, and then to stop this handle from bouncing back up, there was a pin that would be inserted through holes in this piece. And the holes, they don't go all the way through, but the representation of the holes is in there. You put a pin through and that locked the brakes, pinned the brakes on. The rest of the livery application is nice and crisp. We've got the interior of the wagon finished in a slightly different, it's a pretty standard colour actually for this wooden finish that Oxford Rail, and indeed it has to be said, the Bachmann wagons tend to come in this kind of a colour as well. I'm not sure that I like it as a representation of bare wood. It doesn't look right to me, and I've said this before, that bare wood in model form is actually very difficult to get the colour right and looking right. It's not a garish colour, and to be honest, with a bit of weathering or the addition of a load, there's not really a problem in there at all. And we've got all of the internal detail of the planking and also the bottom doors that the wagon carried in there quite nicely. It has to be said, if you turn the wagon over, the corresponding detail for those bottom opening doors is not present in the bottom of the wagon. So it's not an issue, and I don't really think that detracts from the wagon at all. But, just saying. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid release from Oxford Rail. It's nice to see a whole wealth of these new liveries coming through, and in cases like this, it's one which I've not seen from any other manufacturers, so we're getting a lot of variety out there, which can only be a good thing. I'd give this probably a good solid 7.5 to 7.75 out of 10, and for me, the detraction has to be the application of the white lettering with the bleed through of the black. But it's not a big deal, but I do have to point it out anyway. One last little point as well, the buffers are not sprung, and they're a little bit loose on there. I can wiggle that one around. And that's another problem that I find with Oxford Rail wagons. Sometimes you have to be a little bit careful with these buffers. They're not on as securely as other manufacturers. That said, it's quite easy to secure them with a little blob of glue if needs be. But just be careful that they don't come adrift and get lost as something that would be quite easy to happen. But overall, a very nice offering from Oxford Rail. Well, I hope that's been really informative to you. Don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also subscribe to the channel. You'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And you can also follow me on Instagram. I'm there as Jennifer E. Kirk. And until next time, thanks again for watching. It's really appreciated to have you checking in on what I've been up to. And until next time, you take very, very good care of yourself. And I'll see you then. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony, Michael Churchwood, Mark McShane, and Bob 310. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.